The call from the depths of the galaxy came like a whisper, a signal no one had expected to hear. Captain Arya Drake stood on the bridge of the Morning Shadow, the sleek, black-hulled ship that had been her home for over a decade. She studied the signal on the holoscreen before her, an anomaly that defied every explanation. It was an encrypted pulse, ancient but intact, transmitting a message that seemed to be deliberately hidden from the galaxy's prying eyes. The signal came from beyond the boundary of the known star maps, from a sector long thought to be devoid of life or civilization, a place people called the Lost Sector. Arya could feel the weight of the moment. For most of her career, she had commanded exploratory missions to the farthest reaches of space, but this was different. This wasn't just a distant star system, it was an unknown, an enigma wrapped in darkness. Something about the signal tugged at her gut, beckoning her forward. The message it carried seemed urgent, and yet it made no sense. It was a simple phrase, repeated over and over again, though in no language Arya recognized. Awaken the lost, find the path. Her comms officer, Lieutenant Kian Ravel, leaned in beside her, his brow furrowed as he analyzed the data. This signal, it's not from any known civilization, he said, his voice low. It doesn't match any frequency we've cataloged in the last 3 centuries. It's older, much older. Arya turned to him, sensing the unease in his tone. Could it be a glitch? Something we're misinterpreting? Kian shook his head, his fingers dancing across the console. I wish it were, but this signal, it's perfectly structured. Whoever sent it knew exactly what they were doing. It's deliberate. He paused, eyes narrowing, and the message itself, awaken the lost. That sounds like more than just a distress call. It could be a beacon, something waiting for someone to follow it. Arya's mind raced. The Lost Sector was a place wrapped in mystery. It had been explored only briefly centuries ago during humanity's early spacefaring days, but all records of those expeditions were lost. No one knew what lay beyond the fringes of known space, and the Galactic Council had long since abandoned any further attempts to chart the area. But now, with this signal in hand, everything changed. It was as if the universe itself had opened a door, just wide enough to catch a glimpse of something beyond. Set a course, Arya ordered, her voice steady despite the thrill of uncertainty building in her chest. Prepare for immediate departure. We're going to find out what's out there. As the crew of the Morning Shadow scrambled to execute her orders, Arya stood at the helm, staring out into the black expanse. She could feel the weight of the unknown pressing in, but also something more, an inexplicable pull. The signal had been waiting for them, for her, for humanity. Little did she know, this journey would be one of discovery, not just of forgotten stars, but of a truth buried deep within the very fabric of their existence. A truth that could change the fate of the galaxy forever. The ship's engines hummed to life, breaking the silence as they propelled them toward the Lost Sector. As they drifted further from the safety of the known galaxy, Arya couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was not just another adventure. It felt like the beginning of something far greater. Something that had been set in motion long before her birth. The Morning Shadow glided through the void like a shadow, its sleek form slicing through the blackness of the Lost Sector. Outside, the stars seemed dimmer, the space more oppressive, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The crew, though accustomed to the vastness of space, couldn't help but feel an eerie tension in the air. It was as if they were venturing into a place that was never meant to be disturbed. Captain Arya Drake stood on the bridge, her eyes scanning the long-range scanners. The data streams flickered erratically as they neared the center of the Lost Sector. Nothing yet, she muttered under her breath, though her voice betrayed a growing sense of unease. Lieutenant Kian Ravel sat at the communication station, his fingers rapidly tapping the console. The signal's still active, but it's weakening. It's as if it's being blocked or filtered through some kind of barrier, he said, his voice tight. We're not getting any clearer readings. It's almost like someone doesn't want us to follow it. Aria's jaw tightened, but she held her composure. Keep trying. We're not turning back. Just as she spoke, the ship's sensors flared to life and the entire crew froze. On the starboard side, a massive structure materialized from the darkness, an ancient space station hidden in plain sight. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, sprawling with irregular shapes, twisting metal beams, and strange symbols etched into its surface. The station's exterior seemed to shimmer, as if the metal itself was not just matter, but something more, something that defied the laws of physics. Approaching at full speed, Aria said, her voice sharp, "Prepare for docking." The morning shadow maneuvered slowly toward the station. As they drew closer, the crew could see that it was abandoned. No signs of life, no active communication signals. The station seemed frozen in time, as if it had been waiting for centuries for someone to discover it. "Lieutenant, any sign of activity?" Aria asked. Kian was already scanning the structure. "Nothing," he replied, though his brow furrowed. "It's completely dead, but there's something odd. I'm detecting residual energy signatures, faint, but they're there." The crew docked with the station and boarded the airlock. As they ventured inside, they encountered a vast empty hall. The walls were covered in strange symbols, some of which seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. Aria led the crew deeper into the station, her pulse quickening with each step. "Stay alert," she ordered, though there was a strange serenity in her voice. She couldn't explain it, but something in the air, in the station itself, felt familiar, almost comforting, as if the very structure was waiting for them. They reached a central chamber, where the floor was covered in what looked like dust, except it wasn't dust. It was some kind of crystalline substance, sparkling with an unnatural glow. In the center of the room, a pedestal stood, bathed in soft, pulsating light. "Looks like it's meant to hold something," said Lieutenant Ravel, eyeing the pedestal. Aria stepped forward, her mind racing. She could feel the pull of the object, whatever it was, though it was invisible to the naked eye. Without hesitation, she activated a nearby terminal, and the pedestal flickered to life. A holographic star map appeared in the air, more intricate than anything they had ever seen. The stars shimmered with unfamiliar constellations, their positions seeming out of sync with the known galaxy. And then one symbol on the map began to pulse, the same symbol that had appeared in the encrypted message. "Awaken the lost." The holographic map shifted, pointing to a location deep within the heart of the lost sector. A distant star system. The crew stared at it, realizing the significance. "This is it," Aria murmured, her voice low and filled with awe. "This is where it all leads." But just as the map solidified, the air around them grew colder, and a low hum filled the room. The station's lights flickered. Something was awakening within the depths of the structure, something that had been waiting for them. And then a deep, resonant voice echoed through the chamber, startling them all. "The path has been chosen. The journey begins." Aria's heart raced. The voice was not human. It was older, more ancient than anything she could comprehend. Yet somehow it resonated within her as if she had heard it before. The journey had just begun, but the cost was already becoming clear. Whatever lay ahead, the universe had set them on a path from which there was no return. The morning shadow soared deeper into the heart of the lost sector, following the map's eerie path toward the distant star system it had highlighted. Each passing moment seemed to stretch longer as they ventured farther into the unknown, the stars around them dimming, like distant memories fading from the universe's collective consciousness. The crew couldn't shake the feeling that they were trespassing in a place where even time itself was reluctant to tread. "We're approaching the coordinates," Cain Ravel reported, his voice laced with unease. He stood at his station, his fingers frozen over the controls as the ship's sensors registered an odd anomaly. "Captain, something's wrong. The system we're heading to, it's not showing up on any of the galactic charts. It's as if it never existed." Arya stood over his shoulder, studying the readings. A new star system had appeared in the deep black void ahead of them, but it was different. The familiar constellations were missing, replaced by shadows of what should have been. The planets were there, sort of, but they seemed displaced, like they existed in a warped version of reality. Her heart pounded as she realized what was happening. "What do you mean, it doesn't exist?" she asked, trying to maintain control of the situation. Kian hesitated, glancing up at her. "I mean, the system is literally missing from all records. The planets, the star, it's like they were wiped from history. No records of exploration, no settlements, no traffic, just blank space where this should be." The crew exchanged nervous glances. This was no longer just a journey of discovery. It was a journey into the heart of a mystery that might have been buried for a reason. "Approach with caution," Arya ordered, trying to suppress the rising tension in her chest. She turned to the helm. "Let's go in slow. We don't know what we're dealing with here." As the ship moved closer to the first planet, the crew saw it in all its eerie silence. A world that once had been teeming with life, but now stood as a hollow shell. The once blue-green planet was a barren wasteland, covered in cracked plains and ruined cities. The air, devoid of any signs of life, carried an unnatural stillness. "Scan for any signs of life," Arya commanded. Lieutenant Ravel worked quickly, his fingers flying over the interface. Nothing. No heat signatures, no atmospheric readings. It's all dead. The crew was silent as the morning shadow descended toward the surface, landing just outside the ruined city of what seemed to be an ancient civilization. The once glorious city was now a graveyard of shattered spires and half-collapsed domes, overgrown with strange vines that pulsated with an unnatural glow. There were no signs of any inhabitants, no hint of how this world had fallen. "Spread out and keep your comms open," Arya said, her voice calm, but with an edge of urgency. "Find out what happened here." As they stepped onto the planet's surface, the air felt thick, like something was pressing in from all sides. The silence was deafening, broken only by the echoing sound of their footsteps as they moved through the city's ruins. It was as though the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for them to uncover the truth. They arrived at the heart of the city, where an enormous structure stood, its architecture unlike anything the crew had seen. It resembled a temple, but its shape was far more alien, sharp angles and twisting forms that seemed to distort the very air around them. It was clearly ancient, its surface etched with symbols that pulsed faintly, just like the energy from the station they had discovered earlier. "Do you feel that?" Kian whispered, his voice tight with apprehension. Arya nodded slowly, her hand resting on the hilt of her weapon as she scanned the surroundings. "We're not alone," she muttered. "Something's watching us." As they entered the temple, they found it eerily intact, despite the decay of everything around it. At the center of the chamber was a large, circular stone platform, its surface covered in glowing symbols that matched the ones they'd seen on the star map. There was no mistaking it now, the same pattern, the same call, as if the universe itself was directing them toward this point. Then, as if answering their silent question, the floor trembled, and the air became charged with an unnatural energy. From the walls, strange, humanoid figures began to emerge, creatures made of shifting shadows and light, their forms barely perceptible, flickering like ghostly echoes. Arya's crew tensed, weapons drawn, but the creatures made no move to attack. Instead, they circled the platform, as though they were waiting for something or someone. Suddenly, a voice echoed in their minds, a deep, ancient tone reverberating through the temple. "You have come. You are not the first, but you may be the last." The crew froze. There was no mistaking it. These were the Guardians, the forgotten protectors of this lost world, and they were waiting for something only humanity could provide. Arya's heart pounded as she realized that they had not stumbled upon this planet by accident. They were meant to be here. and the Guardians, it seemed, had been waiting for them to awaken the past. The eerie figures circled the stone platform, their forms flickering in and out of existence like fleeting shadows. Aria's team stood still, their weapons still drawn but lowered, sensing that aggression would be futile. The Guardians, whatever they were, seemed less like enemies and more like ancient watchers, bound to a purpose long forgotten by the galaxy. Aria took a cautious step forward, her eyes locked on the shifting figures. "What are you?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with tension. The silence that followed was deafening, and for a moment, the flickering Guardian seemed to pause, as if processing her question. Then, the deep voice returned, this time more resonant, more direct, as if it reverberated not just through the chamber, but through the very fabric of the air itself. "We are the Keepers. The first, the awakened." The words echoed in Aria's mind, sending a chill down her spine. The Keepers, the first, the awakening, none of this made sense. These were terms she had never encountered in any galactic record. And yet they carried a weight, an ancient knowledge, that seemed to transcend her understanding. "Why are you here?" Aria asked, her voice unwavering despite the growing unease within her. The Guardian's forms flickered again, and the one closest to her, the largest of them, stepped forward. Its shadowy figure seemed to solidify for a brief moment, and then, as if drawn by an invisible force, the air around it hummed with energy. The creature's form sharpened, revealing a face, though not a face like any human's. Instead, its features were vaguely humanoid, but elongated, with eyes that glowed faintly like distant stars. "We have waited. The time is now. The one must awaken, or all will be lost." Aria's mind raced. The one? What did that mean? Her thoughts were interrupted as the Guardian raised a hand and pointed toward the stone platform. The symbols on its surface flickered once more, and the chamber's walls seemed to pulse with energy, like the heartbeat of an ancient machine. "Step onto the platform," the Guardian's voice rumbled. "The choice is yours. The path must be completed." Aria hesitated. The message was clear enough. This was the key. The platform, this strange artifact, was the final piece of the puzzle that had been set in motion. She turned to her crew, their expressions a mix of uncertainty and awe. "We have to trust it," Aria said, though she was unsure whether she was trying to convince her team or herself. "This is why we're here. We need to understand what happened, what was lost. But most importantly, we need to find out how we can prevent it from happening again." Lieutenant Ravel spoke up, his voice laced with disbelief. "Are you sure, Captain? We don't know what's going to happen if we activate whatever this is. We could be walking into something beyond our control." "I don't see another choice," Aria replied, her eyes hardening with resolve. "If this is the path to finding out what happened to this civilization, and to what's waiting beyond, then we take it. We can't turn back now." The Guardians watched in silence as Aria stepped toward the platform. As her foot made contact with the stone, the symbol seemed to shimmer and glow more brightly, and the ground beneath her feet vibrated with a low hum. A sudden burst of light shot up from the platform, enveloping her in a brilliant, blinding radiance. For a moment, Aria felt weightless, as though she were floating outside of time and space itself. The light pulsed around her, and she heard whispers, faint, distant voices speaking in a language she didn't recognize, but their tone was familiar, as though they were speaking directly to her soul. The visions began to flood her mind. She saw flashes of planets, worlds teeming with life, but then, in the blink of an eye, they were consumed by darkness. Stars imploded. Entire galaxies were torn asunder. And in the center of it all, a figure stood, a being of unimaginable power, a harbinger of destruction. Then, just as suddenly as it had come, the light vanished. Aria collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. Her mind swam with the overwhelming visions she had just experienced. "Captain?" Kian's voice was filled with concern as he rushed to her side. She stood slowly, her breath still coming in shallow gasps. She didn't speak at first, her mind trying to process what had just happened. The images, the message, it was all too much. But one thing stood clear in her mind. "We were right to come here," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. This wasn't just a mission. It's a warning." Kian's face went pale. "A warning about what?" Arya looked at the team, her gaze hardening with newfound determination. "Something is coming, and we need to stop it before it's too late." The Morning Shadows crew was now caught in a struggle far greater than any they had anticipated. What had been a journey into the unknown had just become a race against time, a fight to prevent the end of all things. And Arya knew they had just uncovered the first fragment of a terrible truth that would change the galaxy forever. The air around Arya crackled with tension as she tried to shake off the haunting visions that had engulfed her mind. The stone platform beneath her feet was still humming softly, the faint glow of its symbols lingering like a ghost in the darkness of the temple. The Guardians, still as enigmatic as ever, watched silently, their presence imposing but strangely comforting. It was as if they were waiting for her to process what she had seen, to understand what was at stake. Kian's voice broke the silence, urgent and insistent. "Captain, what did you see? What happened?" Arya struggled to find her words. She had seen it all, planets consumed by flames, stars dying in a cascade of explosive violence, entire civilizations vanishing in an instant. But the most terrifying part was the figure at the center of it all. A being of unimaginable power, an entity that seemed to embody destruction itself. "I saw the end," Arya said slowly, her voice heavy with the weight of what she had witnessed. "Something's coming. It's not just one world, it's the entire galaxy. Something ancient is waking up, and it's bringing devastation with it." Kian stepped back, his expression pale. "A destroyer? Is that what this is about? Some kind of ancient force?" Arya nodded, her mind still reeling from the vision. "Yes, but it's more than that. It's a cycle, a pattern that's been repeating for eons. Whole star systems vanish, and the ones that survive, they're forgotten, erased from history. The Guardians, the Keepers, they're the last remnants of those who tried to stop it." Lieutenant Ravel spoke up, his voice edged with doubt. "And what do they want with us? Why did they bring us here? We're just humans, Captain." Arya turned to the Guardians, who stood in silence, their figures flickering like the last embers of a dying fire. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were part of something much greater, something beyond her understanding. But one thing was clear, they had chosen humanity, or perhaps humanity had chosen them. "They've been waiting," she said softly, almost to herself. "Waiting for the one who could see the pattern, the one who could understand the warning." She met Kian's gaze. I think it's us. We're the ones who have to stop it." There was a long pause as the crew absorbed her words, the weight of their meaning settling on their shoulders like an invisible burden. The galaxy wasn't just in danger, it was dying, and humanity was at the center of the storm. Arya didn't know how or why, but she could feel it in her bones. The future of every living thing hinged on them now. A low rumble echoed through the chamber, pulling them back to the present. The Guardians stepped aside, revealing a hidden passage that had been concealed in the shadows. It led deep beneath the surface of the temple, into a space that seemed to stretch far beyond the dimensions of the structure above them. "The path is open," the Guardian's voice rumbled, as if responding to Arya's thoughts. "To stop the coming darkness, you must find the fracture, the heart of the end." "The fracture?" Arya repeated, frowning. "What does that mean? Where is it?" The Guardian's eyes, if they could be called eyes, shimmered with a strange, knowing light. "The fracture is not a place. It is a moment, the point in time where all things will break. You must find it, and you must repair it." Kian's brow furrowed. Repair time itself. The Guardians did not respond, but the eerie hum of the platform seemed to intensify, urging them forward. Arya stepped toward the passage without hesitation, her heart pounding with resolve. The fracture, a moment in time, a tear in the very fabric of reality itself. It was hard to comprehend, but the urgency was undeniable. She glanced back at her crew. We don't have much time. Whatever this fracture is, we need to find it, and we need to fix it before everything falls apart. They moved quickly, descending into the depths of the temple. The passage seemed to stretch endlessly before them, as if the temple itself was a labyrinth designed to test their resolve. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, until it felt like they were walking through a void, a place where time didn't flow in a straight line, but twisted and bent in on itself. At the far end of the passage, they found a massive chamber. It was unlike any other space they had encountered on this planet, larger, more complex, and filled with strange technology that hummed with an energy that was both alien and familiar. In the center of the room stood a massive, floating crystalline structure, its surface covered in swirling symbols. The entire room pulsed with energy, and Arya could feel the weight of the fracture in the air, the sense that they were standing at the precipice of something catastrophic. The Guardian's voice filled the chamber, as if it were emanating from the very walls themselves. To heal the fracture, you must first understand the cause. The one who causes the end must be stopped before the cycle completes. The heart of the end is closer than you think. Arya stepped forward, her hand reaching toward the crystal. Her fingers brushed its surface, and in that moment, the room exploded with blinding light. And in that light, she saw it, the truth, the figure, the destroyer, the harbinger of the galaxy's collapse. But it wasn't a being at all. It was something far worse, a force of nature, a fracture in the very foundation of reality itself, and it was already beginning to awaken. The light from the crystalline structure engulfed Arya and her crew, flooding the chamber with an intensity that made her eyes water. She felt as though her very soul were being pulled toward the crystal, drawn by an irresistible force. The vision surged again, this time clearer, sharper. The destroyer wasn't a being, it was a rupture in the fabric of time itself, a tear that had been growing for eons, feeding on the entropy of the universe, consuming worlds, stars, and civilizations in its wake. She could see it all, the cycle of collapse and rebirth, a loop that repeated across millennia. Each time, the fracture would grow, stretching deeper into the universe's core, until it reached a tipping point where everything would unravel. The destroyer was not some monstrous entity. It was a natural force, an event that occurred at the end of every cycle, and it had begun its descent once more. And now, humanity was entangled in its path. The blinding light began to fade, leaving the crew standing at the heart of the crystal chamber. Arya staggered back, her mind spinning with the enormity of what she had just witnessed. The truth was far worse than anything she had imagined. "We're dealing with a tear in time," Kian whispered, his voice hoarse. "A wound in the universe itself. How do you fight something like that?" Arya's chest tightened as she took in the reality of their situation. If the fracture was truly a rupture in time, then the very laws of existence were at risk. The universe, as they knew it, could unravel at any moment, and nothing could stop it. Not weapons, not armies, and certainly not the Morning Shadow. But there was still a chance. The Guardians had said it. The fracture must be healed, and the one who causes the end must be stopped. She just didn't know how. The crystalline structure pulsed again, its light shifting to a deeper, more ominous hue. Arya turned to the Guardians, who had appeared once more, their shadowy forms flickering like distant stars. They stood silent, waiting, watching. "The one," Arya said, her voice steady despite the chaos raging inside her. "What does it mean? Who is the one, and how do we stop it?" The largest of the Guardians stepped forward, its ethereal form solidifying as it spoke in a voice that resonated through the chamber. "The one is not a who, but a what. It is the embodiment of the fracture itself, the cause of the end. The fracture exists because of it. It is the culmination of all the cycles, a being of pure destruction born from the collapse of all things. To stop it, you must go to the source, to the core of the fracture. Aria felt a chill run down her spine. The core of the fracture, where the boundaries of time and space blurred into one another. She knew that such a place would not be a simple destination. To reach it, they would have to navigate the very collapse of reality itself, where the past, present, and future were indistinguishable. Kian's voice was laced with disbelief. And how do we even survive getting there? The universe is collapsing, time is breaking apart. The Guardian's eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowed faintly as it regarded Kian, its voice softer this time. The path is fraught with peril, but you are not alone. The last remnants of the Keepers will guide you. The one cannot be stopped by force, but by understanding. To heal the fracture, you must restore what was lost. Aria's heart raced as the pieces started to fall into place. Restore what was lost, she echoed, her mind spinning. What could be restored? Time itself? The universe? It didn't make sense. The Guardian's form flickered again, and the chamber around them shifted. The walls seemed to bend and warp, and for a brief moment, Aria saw glimpses of other worlds, other civilizations, worlds that had fallen into ruin, their history erased, their people forgotten. Each one seemed to flicker out of existence, replaced by darkness. The cycle is incomplete, the Guardian continued. The key to healing the fracture lies in the understanding of the past. The One was not always the force of destruction. It was once the harbinger of creation, a being of power created to ensure balance in the universe. But something went wrong. A great corruption took hold, and the cycle was corrupted. What was once meant to sustain life became the destroyer of worlds. The room seemed to pulse with a strange energy, and Aria felt herself drawn toward the crystalline structure once again. This time, she reached out to touch it. As her fingers made contact with its surface, a surge of energy coursed through her, and a flood of visions overtook her. She saw the origin of the fracture, a moment in time when the One, the harbinger of creation, was corrupted by an unknown force. It had not been the universe's nature to decay. The One had been the architect of balance, but something had tainted its purpose, turning it into the bringer of the end. The truth was clear now. The fracture wasn't just a wound in time. It was a message, a warning that the balance had been broken, and it was up to Aria and her crew to restore it before everything collapsed. But how? How could they repair something as vast as the universe itself? The crystal pulsed once more, as if answering her question. The path was set, and the crew would have to follow it, to the core of the fracture, where the One could be reached and, perhaps, redeemed. But the journey would be like nothing they had ever encountered. Aria stood at the edge of the crystalline structure, her mind reeling with the weight of what she had just witnessed. The fracture was not just a wound in the fabric of time. It was a living, breathing corruption, an ancient force gone astray. And now, humanity was the only one who could stop it. The Keepers had told her they were not alone in this fight, but that did little to ease the gnawing feeling in her gut. They were on the cusp of something far beyond their understanding. "We need to go to the core," Aria said quietly, as much to herself as to her crew. Her voice was tinged with both resolve and uncertainty. "We have to find the One before it destroys everything." Kian stepped up beside her, his face a mask of determination, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. "You're saying this force, this One, was once the protector of creation, and now it's the destroyer. That's a lot to ask anyone to believe." "I believe it," Aria replied, her voice unwavering. "I've seen it. The cycle, the corruption. The One is still out there, but it's not too late to stop it. We can fix this." Ravel and the rest of the crew nodded in silent agreement, their faces set with grim determination. They had already been through so much: alien ruins, cryptic messages, visions of destruction. This was their last chance, and they would not back down. The Guardian's voice echoed through the chamber again. its words thick with a gravity that weighed heavily on their hearts. The core lies beyond the boundaries of time. It is where the fracture begins and where it ends. You will face trials, moments when the past and future will collide, where your every step could fracture the universe further. The one's true power lies there. If you fail, all will be lost. Aria's breath hitched. She had known that failure was a possibility, but hearing it from the Guardian's lips made it all the more real. There would be no second chances. "We've come too far to turn back now," she said, her voice firm. "We'll find a way through." With that, the team began to make their way toward the opening in the chamber that led deeper into the temple. The path was narrow, and the walls pulsed with an unsettling energy, as though they were alive, reacting to their presence. As they descended, the environment around them began to distort, twisting and shifting like a nightmare made real. The air was thick with static, the ground shaking beneath their feet. "Do you feel that?" Kian asked, his voice tight with concern. "The air, it's like we're walking through a rift." Aria nodded, her eyes scanning the path ahead. "We're getting closer. This is it." Suddenly, the passage widened, and they found themselves standing before a massive rift, a swirling vortex of light and shadow that stretched into infinity. At the center of the rift was a dark void, an absence that seemed to consume everything around it. In the center of this void, an immense presence pulsed with power, a deep, resonant hum that sent a wave of dizziness through Aria's mind. "The core," Ravel breathed. It's like a hole in the universe." "Not just a hole," Aria replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is the heart of the fracture, the point where time itself has unraveled." As they stepped closer, the reality around them began to break down, and for a moment, it felt like they were floating in an endless sea of fractured moments, visions from their past, their future, and worlds long gone. Aria saw flashes of distant stars, civilizations in their prime, only to watch them collapse into ruin. She saw moments from her own life, from the earliest days of her career to the moment she first set foot on the Morning Shadow, to the very moment when the crew first discovered the temple. But there was no time to dwell on these fleeting visions. They had come to confront the heart of the fracture, and that meant they had to focus. Aria steeled herself and stepped forward, feeling the full weight of the responsibility bearing down on her. The Guardians' voices filled the space once more, their words cutting through the madness of the swirling vortex. "To heal the fracture, you must face the One. It is no longer a protector. It is the embodiment of corruption, of destruction. You must break the cycle, or it will break you." The rift pulsed, and a dark figure began to materialize in the center. It was not a being of flesh and bone, but something far more intangible, an amalgamation of pure energy, an entity formed of swirling darkness and light, shifting constantly, as if it existed across all points in time at once. Its presence was overwhelming, its power palpable, and as it emerged fully from the void, Aria knew that this was the One. It was not a monster. It was a force, a consequence of creation itself turned twisted and wrong. Its form shimmered, now a vague shape resembling a humanoid figure, but with no distinct features, only an endless, shifting swirl of cosmic energy. "I am the end," the figure spoke, its voice a dissonant cacophony that seemed to reverberate across all dimensions. "You cannot stop me. I am the cycle." Aria stood tall, despite the weight of the entity's presence pressing down on her. "You were not meant to be this. You were a guardian, a force for balance. What happened?" The figure flickered, its voice almost melancholic. "Balance was lost. The cycle was corrupted. I was twisted by time itself." Aria's heart pounded. The truth was clear. The One wasn't inherently evil. It was the distortion of the cycle, a result of a world gone wrong. But it was still the cause of the fracture, and she had to stop it. "Then let us restore balance," Aria said firmly, her voice echoing in the vastness of the rift. "Let us end the cycle of destruction." The figure hesitated. A moment of recognition, or perhaps it was a fleeting trace of the protector it once was. Either way, Arya knew what she had to do. The moment had arrived. To heal the fracture, they would have to confront the very essence of creation and destroy it to save the universe. The void around them pulsed with unbearable intensity. The One, an unfathomable mass of energy, time, and space, loomed before Arya and her crew, a constant churn of darkness and light. It spoke of cycles and of corruption, a force that had once brought balance but was now the harbinger of ruin. But there was one truth Arya had clung to. The fracture could be healed, and the One could be redeemed. "You were once a guardian," Arya said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "A protector. We can restore what was lost. But you must let go of the destruction. You must allow us to fix the cycle." The One shimmered, its form flickering like a dying star, its voice reverberating with the weight of ages. "The cycle was corrupted. The balance cannot be restored. I am the end. There is no beginning." Arya shook her head, refusing to accept the finality in its words. She could feel the pulse of the fracture deep within her chest, the threads of time and reality twisting, threatening to snap. But she also knew that this wasn't the true end. The end wasn't inevitable. It was the distortion of the cycle that had created the One in its corrupted form. There was still a way to restore balance. "We're not asking you to destroy yourself," Arya continued. "We're asking you to remember. Remember what you were before the corruption took root. Remember what it felt like to be the guardian of creation." For a moment, the figure's form seemed to flicker, as if it were struggling with a deep internal conflict. The energy around them shifted, becoming less chaotic, as though the One was listening. "The memories," the One murmured, its voice distant. "The memories of the time before the cycle was broken. I remember them, but they are lost in the rift. The fracture, it scattered everything. The balance, it is gone." Arya stepped forward, her mind racing for a solution. The One's memories were locked in the rift, the very source of the fracture. The key to restoring the cycle lay in reaching those memories, in restoring the lost connection between creation and destruction. "There is still a way to fix this," she said, more to herself than to the One. She turned to her crew. "We need to enter the rift. We need to find the pieces of the cycle and piece them back together. The One is the key. Its memories, its true purpose, are still there, but we need to restore them." Kian's eyes widened. "You want us to enter the rift? That's madness. It's pure chaos in there." "I know," Arya said, meeting his gaze, "but it's the only way." The Guardian's voice echoed in the rift, its form stabilizing, a strange calm descending over the chaos. "You are not alone. The path is hidden, but not lost. The cycle can be restored if you seek the source, the fracture of memory. The rift holds the truth, and the key to healing is within it." The chamber around them shuddered, the rift pulsating with increasing intensity. Arya could feel it, a deep and resonant vibration that connected with the very core of her being. The pieces were coming together. The cycle could be restored, but they would have to journey into the very heart of the fracture to recover the missing memories. Arya turned back to the One. "You were created to protect the cycle, to keep the balance. If we can restore it, you'll be whole again. You can remember who you were and what you're meant to be." The One's form rippled, and for a moment, Arya saw what it had once been. A vast, radiant being of light, a force of creation standing tall against the void. The memory was fleeting, but it was enough. The One's essence was not destruction, it was harmony. But the corruption had twisted it into something unrecognizable. "I remember," the One said, its voice soft, like a whisper in the dark. "I remember the balance. I remember the creation. It is within me, but it is lost." Arya held her breath. "Then let us help you find it. Together, we can restore the balance. We can fix the cycle." The One seemed to waver, its form flickering with uncertainty. The rift around them pulsed once more, as if awaiting a final decision. Arya knew that the next moment would be crucial. If they could not bridge the gap, if they could not heal the fracture, the universe would collapse. But if they succeeded, if they restored the balance, the universe could begin anew. With a final resolute step, Arya reached out and touched the core of the rift. The energy surged around her, and she felt herself being pulled into the void. Time and space bent around her, the memories of the one flooding her mind. She saw everything: the creation, the fall, the cycles of destruction and rebirth. It was all there, scattered through time, each moment a piece of the whole. And then she saw the fracture, the moment when everything had gone wrong. Arya closed her eyes and focused, reaching into the rift, pulling the broken pieces together. The one was not beyond redemption. It was a part of the universe's fabric, a guardian meant to protect the balance, not to destroy it. As she grasped the final piece, a brilliant light exploded from the core of the rift, and the fracture began to heal. The darkness receded, and time itself seemed to reset. The one's form stabilized, no longer an entity of chaos, but a force of creation once more. The rift closed with a final, resonant hum, and Arya opened her eyes. She stood in the chamber once again, the crew around her. The universe was intact. The cycle was restored. The one, now whole, looked down at her, its voice calm and steady. "Thank you. The balance has been restored." Arya nodded, feeling the weight of their victory settle over her. The galaxy is safe, for now. And as the crew turned to leave the temple, the stars above them seemed to shine brighter, as if the universe itself had been given a second chance. The cycle had been broken, but now it was whole once more, and humanity had saved it.